He was Hollywood's ultimate tough guy, a stoic, wrist-snapping warrior who fought for justice on the big screen. But now, he's standing shoulder to shoulder with Vladimir Putin, waving the Russian flag and calling America the villain. This is not just the fall of an action star. This is one of the strangest transformations in modern pop culture, from box office hero to Kremlin mouthpiece. What the hell happened to Steven Seagal? When Steven Seagal burst onto the scene in 1988 with Above the Law, he was a total curveball. In an era dominated by the bulging biceps of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, Seagal was different. He was tall, imposing, and moved with a quiet, lethal grace. His brand of martial arts, Aikido, wasn't about flashy kicks. It was about brutal, joint-locking efficiency. He didn't just beat his enemies, he completely dismantled them. And that formula was an instant hit. The film, which he co-wrote, locked in the classic Seagal persona, a former operative with a shadowy past, a strict code of honor, and an almost supernatural gift for inflicting pain. Audiences ate it up. Even the legendary critic Roger Ebert saw the potential, noting that Seagal had a strong and particular screen presence and was worth the buzz. Hollywood rushed to cash in. A string of hits like Hard to Kill, Marked for Death, and Out for Justice quickly cemented his place as a box office powerhouse. Then, in 1992, he hit the absolute peak of his fame with Under Siege. His performance as the resourceful cook Casey Ryback turned the film into a global blockbuster, pulling in over $156 million and becoming his most critically acclaimed movie. For a brief, shining moment, Steven Seagal was right up there with Stallone and Schwarzenegger, a true A-list action hero. He was the untouchable American good guy. But behind the scenes, that heroic image was already starting to fall apart. Even at the height of his fame, weird stories started leaking from Hollywood sets. A reputation was building that Seagal was difficult, arrogant, and sometimes genuinely abusive. Actor John Leguizamo, who worked with him on the 1996 film Executive Decision, tells a wild story. On the first day of rehearsal, Seagal allegedly announced, "I'm in command. What I say is law." When Leguizamo laughed, thinking it was a joke, he says Seagal slammed him against a brick wall. And that wasn't an isolated incident. Stuntmen accused him of intentionally hurting them during fight scenes, a massive breach of on-set etiquette. Beyond his behavior, the very backstory he'd built his mystique on started to unravel. Seagal had long hinted he'd secretly worked for the CIA in Japan, telling the Los Angeles Times he was an advisor to several CIA agents. But there's never been a shred of evidence to back that up, and his own ex-wife flatly denied it. Some called him a pathological liar for his tall tales. He claimed he studied under Morihei Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, which would have been impossible since Ueshiba died in 1969, years before Seagal even moved to Japan. This growing reputation as a bully and a fibber started to poison his career. His 1994 directorial debut, On Deadly Ground, was a box office flop that doubled as a preachy environmental lecture, earning him a Razzie Award for Worst Director. The action hero persona was wearing thin, and people started seeing him as just an actor with a massive ego. Around the same time, the first serious sexual harassment allegations against him surfaced. The invincible hero on screen was becoming a liability in real life, and his box office magic was fading fast. The fall was about to be just as swift as his rise. By the late 90s, Hollywood had moved on. The era of the lone wolf action hero was fading, and Seagal's movies felt like relics. After Fire Down Below bombed in 1997, his next film, The Patriot, skipped theaters entirely and went straight to video in the U.S. For a guy who once owned the #1 spot at the box office, this was a stunning fall from grace. The 2000s saw Seagal descend into the purgatory of the direct-to-video market. He churned out a mind-boggling number of low-budget action flicks, often as a producer and writer. Titles like Belly of the Beast, Kill Switch, and Driven to Kill became permanent residents of the bargain bin. In this new world, quality control was a distant memory. The films were often a mess, poorly shot, and featured an increasingly sluggish and overweight Seagal, who famously started performing many of his scenes while sitting down. During this time, he tried one of the strangest comeback attempts imaginable, the reality TV show Steven Seagal, Lawman. The A&E series followed Seagal as he performed his duties as a real-life reserve deputy chief in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, a role the department later admitted was largely for show. The series was a bizarre ratings hit at first, with millions tuning in to see the spectacle of a movie star on police raids. But the show was pure self-promotion, painting Seagal as a wise master, teaching veteran cops their own business. The series was ultimately suspended after a lawsuit was filed against Seagal, adding yet another stain to his public image. Effectively blacklisted by Hollywood and seen more as a parody of himself than a star, Seagal was a man looking for a new stage, one that would give him the respect he felt he deserved. He found it in the last place anyone expected, Vladimir Putin's Russia. While Seagal's star was dimming in the West, it was shining brightly in the East. His 90s action films were huge in the post-Soviet world, making him a household name in Russia. He started visiting the country, where he wasn't treated like a washed-up actor, but like a superstar. And it was there that he found a kindred spirit in Russian President Vladimir Putin. Their friendship, which seems to have kicked off around 2013, was built on a shared love of martial arts and a mutual respect for the strongman image. For Putin, a former KGB agent who works hard to project an aura of masculine power, hanging out with a Hollywood action hero was a fantastic piece of soft power PR. For Seagal, a man whose relevance at home was evaporating, the attention from a world leader was intoxicating. An LA-based fixer named Bob Van Ronkel, who connects American celebs with Russian elites, helped make it happen. He got Seagal invited to events in Russia, where he eventually met Putin at an after-party. They hit it off. Soon, Seagal was gushing publicly about the Russian president, calling him one of the greatest world leaders, if not the greatest world leader alive today, in an interview. This wasn't just a casual friendship, it was a strategic move. While Seagal was becoming a punchline in America, he was being treated like a respected international figure in Russia. This new role gave him a platform and a sense of importance that Hollywood wouldn't. It was the perfect escape for a man whose American dream had gone sour, and he jumped in with both feet. This story just gets more unbelievable, doesn't it? It's a perfect example of how fame and ego can send people down the strangest rabbit holes. If you're fascinated by deep dives like this, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You won't want to miss what we investigate next. Now, let's get back to how a buddy-buddy friendship turned into an official political post. From friend of Russia to Kremlin spokesperson, the bromance between Seagal and Putin quickly became something much more official. In 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, Seagal loudly supported the move, which was condemned by most of the world. He even went to Crimea and played a concert with his blues band, hosted by a pro-Kremlin biker gang. His allegiance was crystal clear. In response, Ukraine banned him from entering the country for 5 years, calling him a threat to their national security. But the ultimate prize for his loyalty came in November 2016. In a televised ceremony, Vladimir Putin personally granted him Russian citizenship and handed him a Russian passport. A Kremlin spokesperson said Seagal had been asking for it quite insistently and over a lengthy period. Just like that, he was a high-profile asset for the Kremlin. 2 years later, it became official. Russia's foreign ministry named Seagal a special representative for Russia-U.S. cultural links. It was an unpaid role, sort of like a UN goodwill ambassador, meant to improve humanitarian ties when diplomatic relations were in the gutter. To many in the West, it seemed completely absurd, another bizarre chapter in the Seagal saga. But for the Kremlin, it was smart politics. Use a famous American face to push their message. Seagal dove into his new role, becoming a reliable mouthpiece for the Kremlin. He called claims of Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election stupid. He started talking like he wasn't just an actor anymore, but a geopolitical expert who knew the truth the Western media was hiding. The American action hero was now officially working for a foreign power. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, any shred of doubt about Steven Seagal's loyalties disappeared. He went all in as a Kremlin propagandist. He told Fox News he saw Russia and Ukraine as one family and blamed an outside entity for provoking the conflict. A talking point lifted straight from the Kremlin script. His actions got even more blatant. He visited Russian-occupied territories in Ukraine, including the ruins of the Olenivka prison camp, where dozens of Ukrainian POWs had been killed. He was filmed there inspecting shrapnel and appearing to back Russia's claim that Ukraine had attacked its own soldiers, a claim widely debunked by independent experts. He had already joined a pro-Kremlin political party in 2021. And while his U.S. citizenship means he can't actually run for office in Russia, the message was loud and clear. He even tried to get political, proposing a Steven Seagal law to punish businesses for environmental pollution. In February 2023, Putin awarded him the Order of Friendship, a high state honor given to foreigners who've helped Russia. Then, in a Russian state documentary that surfaced, Seagal reportedly declared he was 100% a Russian and stood with the country and its president. From action star to political envoy to sworn defender of the Kremlin, the transformation was complete. So how does a guy who played an American hero end up as a propaganda tool for an authoritarian regime? There's no single answer, but it's probably a mix of a collapsing career and a colossal ego. The simplest theory? It's a story about a desperate hunt for relevance. By the early 2000s, Seagal's career in the West was dead. He was a relic of a past era, buried under allegations of abuse and churning out movies nobody saw. In America, he was a joke. But Russia, and especially Vladimir Putin, offered him an exit. In Moscow, he wasn't a has-been. He was a respected star, a martial arts guru, and a pal to one of the most powerful men on earth. This new identity fed a narcissism that Hollywood had long since stopped feeding. He got a title, a passport, and a seat at the table, everything he'd lost. He found a new audience that didn't just tolerate him but admired him, and a political system that values loyalty above all else. It's also possible he genuinely believes some of it. Seagal's characters were often vigilantes who operated above the law to fight a corrupt system. Maybe he projects that fantasy onto world politics, seeing Putin as a fellow strongman taking a stand against a corrupt West. His rants about disinformation and his claim that over half of the people in America actually love Russia suggest a worldview that's deeply conspiratorial and pretty disconnected from reality. And finally, there's the theory that this is just the ultimate performance from a guy who has allegedly been making up his own legend for decades. After building a career on tall tales about being a CIA agent and an Aikido prodigy, what's a bigger story than recasting yourself as an international diplomat? In that light, his Russian chapter isn't a betrayal of his old persona. It's the most extreme version of it. The story of Steven Seagal is a cautionary tale about the allure of power and the bizarre lengths a fallen star might go to stay in the spotlight. He started as a symbol of American movie justice, a hero for the little guy. He now stands as a symbol of something else entirely, a celebrity who seemingly traded his cultural identity for the embrace of an autocrat. His legacy is now split in two. In the U.S., he's mostly seen as a fringe figure, a propagandist for a geopolitical rival. In Russia, he's a celebrated friend of the state. The man who once took down terrorists on a battleship now appears in Russian state-sponsored projects, denouncing the very country that made him a star. Is it a tragedy of a man whose ego couldn't handle his own decline? The logical endpoint for a true believer in authoritarianism? Or just the final, weirdest act of a lifelong storyteller? What started as a career built on the fantasy of American heroism has ended in the strange reality of Russian propaganda, leaving just one big, inescapable question. What on earth went wrong?